All right, so today we're going to talk about how to tie a slip bobber. Oh, by the way, I'm Davis. This is the Flopping Crappie channel, and last time I posted a video like this was actually a full year ago, and it's got over 250,000 views right now. So I read through the comments section. I was actually getting comments as of like 2 weeks or less than that, a couple days ago, and I was reading through the comments section, and I wanted to change a couple things. Not change a couple things. I wanted to add to the video. See, in that first video, it was a very simple, easy setup. Your slip was something like this that you buy at Walmart for 99 cents. Fairly cheap. And then you got your bobber of some kind. Maybe it's a plastic bobber, plastic and foam, plastic grommets. Not that expensive of a setup. But now that you kind of watched that video and went through it, and there's a lot of different ideas thrown about how you tie a slip bobber. That was just one of 3 ways to tie on a slip bobber. Now these are my 3 ways. So the first is obviously the cheap way. You go to the store or go to Walmart and you get something like this for 99 cents. They come in like a 12 pack or something. And they're already pre-tied slip knots of this yarn, which is not very good. And then you get your little foam slip bobber of some kind, maybe like this, or some plastic like this, plastic grommets on both of them. And then you got your basic jig setup, which is what I used in that video. It's a very cheap, inexpensive way to tie a slip bobber. Now that was the first way. I'm gonna go through 2 more ways in this video. And if you wanna go back to see the first way, I'll link the original video in the description below. So the second way to do this is to actually tie your own slip. So instead of using a piece of yarn like this, which if you do this enough, you realize these don't actually stick. What happens is either after you're casting or you start reeling in fish, they get caught in the eyelets right here, in the eyelets of these rods, and they slide up and down. Okay, so the next thing you can do is actually tie your own slip knot. Now I'm going to be using 50-pound braid, and you can use whatever you want. You can try out a number of ways or a number of pound lines if you want to try mono, fluorocarbon, braided line. Try out what you want, see if something works for you. The third way I'm going to talk about after this one is actually what I use most often. But I figured I'd actually tell you how to tie your own knot in case you wanted to try it out, and maybe it works better for you than me. So here's what we're going to do. We got our 50-pound braid line right here, and this is a 6-pound monofilament on this rod. This is going to be our slip bobber setup rod, and I'll talk about rods at the end of it, of which ones I use. So we got our 50-pound braid line. Now you don't need this much. This is quite a bit of line. You're going to need probably about 6 inches to be on the safe side. So we're going to cut off 6 inches of line here. And what we're going to do is first you're going to lay out your monofilament line. And you're going to take your 6 inches of braided line or floral or even mono, whatever you cut off, and you're going to make a loop. So it looks like this. You're just going to loop it together. Now you're going to take one side of your braided line or whatever you're tying your slip knot with and pinch it with the line coming out of your rod. So it's going to be pinched together just like that, okay? So here's the mono, here's my braid, they're going to be pinched together. Now the other side of the slip knot, the other tag end of that, you're going to wrap around both your braided line or whatever line you're tying the slip with and your main line. In this case, it's my 6-pound mono. And I'm going to wrap it around, I would do it 4, 5, 6 times, something like that. Now the key is to wrap it around both your slip knot line and your main line while you leave this loop. It's important you got to leave this loop on the one end. So I'd like to just pinch with my index and thumb and kind of pinch the main line, which is my 6-pound mono, and my slip knot line, my braid here, and kind of pinch it so that loop stays open. So you can pinch your main line and your slip knot line together as you wrap the other tag end around both of them. Okay, so now I've wrapped it around 4 or 5 times there. Now you're going to take the line that you wrapped around, that you were continually wrapping around both your main line and your slip knot line, and you're going to bring it back through that loop that we left open. Okay, then you're going to grab the tag end through that loop. You're going to grab the other end of your slip knot line, and you're going to slowly pull them together. Now you can wet them a little bit with some saliva, make it slide down easier. And as you'll notice here, these things will pull together to form that slip knot line. Now I probably could have wrapped it one more time, give it a little extra strength. But this and this are pretty much similar. This one got wrapped around probably 2 or 3 more times. The one that actually comes in a package. But same concept, you can wrap it a couple more times before you put that tag end back through that loop. Alright, so now that we have our slip tied on, we're now going to put our bobber, whatever kind of slip bobber you have, through the main line. Let's try this one. Put it through the main line. We're going to try this different one. It's probably going to slide easier. There we go. Up to our slip. Now if you notice, this is a pretty large grommet. That's what the end of this is called. The end of the bobber is called the grommet. Now this is a metal grommet, and even a lot of these metal grommets, this is a wobble bobber and this is just a basic kind of pencil style slip bobber. The metal grommets are usually larger than the plastic grommets. So here is a plastic grommet, and you see how narrow that is compared to that, compared to these two. So hand-tied slips will definitely stop a plastic slip bobber. In this case, it's a foam and plastic slip bobber, or a pure plastic slip bobber, which I had somewhere. I don't know where I put, oh, here it is. See, here's a pure plastic slip bobber. See how small that grommet is compared to that. Let's pull that out of the way. Compare those two. So you might have to tie on maybe 2 slips if you're using these larger metal grommets, because otherwise they will slide through that. The line will slide through all the way through your bobber and it won't stop it. Now, after you put your bobber on, and assuming you tied on a correct size for your bobber, in which case I'd probably use something like this because it's a smaller grommet size, you put on something to stop the bobber from sliding all the way down the hook, or all the way down the line to the hook. A lot of people use a split shot like this. It's very simple. Some people use a bobber stop. Now the bobber stop's actually going to be the last way I personally like tying on these slip bobbers. But you're probably going to need something to stop it from going down to the hook. And the reason for that is because if the bobber slides all the way down to the hook, it gives the fish leverage to actually shake the hook. So you definitely want to put something there. You could even tie another slip 6 inches above your hook if you really wanted to. If you didn't want to have any weight and you didn't have any of these rubber bobber stops, you could tie another slip stop on the line just above the hook. So that's the second way to do this, is to tie your own slip. And again, I haven't had the greatest success with these. I've used monofilament fluoro braid. Somebody in the comment section on one of the videos commented that they tied one really tight, and they even used super glue to put on there. I wouldn't recommend that. I don't know how super glue reacts to monofilament or fluorocarbon line. I don't know if it kind of cuts, if there's chemicals in there that cut through it, so I wouldn't recommend that. But you can experiment with this. It's a very simple knot. So that is the second way. Now the last way, and the way that I actually tie these on and fish these, oh, fish just jumped right there. Good for him. Is I use these rubber bobber stops. Now these rubber bobber stops, I believe they come in packs of, I think they come in like 6 of these, half dozen of these blue clips. And the reason I like these is, one, they slide up and down the line when you pull it, but they also stay for the most part where you keep them. They slip a lot less than the hand-tied ones, and especially these pre-tied ones. So far, these are the best that I can find that doesn't slip when you're either casting or when you're reeling in a fish. It happens when you're reeling a fish occasionally, but this is by far the best I've ever used. So, and they're inexpensive. So the first thing you're going to do is obviously put it on the line first without any bobber or anything else on this line. So all you're going to do is, they come with this wire loop there. You're going to just put your line through that wire loop and pull it about 4 inches through. And then you're going to grab one of the rubber bobber stops grab this blue tab and you're going to pull the rubber bobber stop off the line, or off that wire, and it's going to bind into the line like that, and you're just going to keep pulling until this rubber bobber stop pulls all the way through this tag end. So you're just going to keep pulling until that tag end comes through, and there you go. So you slide this one up the line, and then you slide, I'm going to use this bobber actually instead. This is a wobble bobber. These bobbers are a lot better in wind. If you're calm, if you're fishing calm water, I recommend something like this. Probably take that tag off there, get that out of the video. I recommend something like this. This is just a pencil style, slim profile bobber, but I recommend getting the metal grommets. The reason that's important is because especially if you're using monofilament line, if you're using these plastic grommets, after you set the hook so many times, what happens is the monofilament actually cuts into the side of that plastic. And when you start casting over and over again, the line will get caught in that cut that it makes in the plastic, and it won't slide through the entire slip bobber anymore. So I highly recommend, it doesn't matter what you're getting. This is the one I use for wind. I had a video, best bobber for crappie fishing in the wind. These are actually made mostly for walleye fishermen, but this is a 1/8 ounce. These are 1/16 ounce. That's great for crappie fishing. Any calmer water, definitely recommend this pencil style jig, but the metal grommets are essential. So we're going to put this wobble bobber on first, and you're just going to slide it through the metal grommet. Now you're going to pull your line all the way through up to your bobber stop right here. So there we go. We got our bobber stop, and you see it's large enough it'll stop that bobber from going through, or stop the line from going through that metal grommet. So the next step, again, you can put on a split shot if you're using just an Aberdeen hook, something this. If you're using just a basic Aberdeen hook, you can put a split shot on there to give it weight, to weight that bobber down so it sits upright in the water. But a lot of times I tie on these jigs. There's numerous sizes of jigs, numerous kinds, but this is the size I like to use quite a bit. One, it's got this little barb here. Really helps if you're fishing with plastics, helps if you keep the tube on the hook. But you can also put minnows on these. And the cool thing is this is a 1/16 ounce weight, and a lot of times I use this is a really faded one because I've used it quite a bit, 1/16 ounce bobber, so it matches up perfect. And that's the one thing about these wobble bobbers, it says the weight right on them of how much weight you need for this bobber to sit up and down. But before we actually tie on this jig here, I need something to stop the bobber from sliding down to the jig. And that's when I use another one of these rubber bobber stops. It doesn't add any weight to the line, and it does what it needs to do. Make sure you put your line through the loop before you pull these rubber bobber stops off. There we go. So you're gonna just slide that rubber bobber stop off the wire, and it's gonna buckle the line in half like that, and you're just gonna keep pulling until it goes through that tag end, and there you go. It's on the monofilament. Now I only put these, I put these about a half a foot, 6 inches to 8 inches above my jig. That's all you really need. So here's my jig, it'd sit right there, and about 6 inches above it, I got my wobble bobber right there, just like that. The one thing I would recommend, and I've been noticing this actually past couple weeks, I would recommend putting a bead above the bottom bobber stop. So the one that you just tied on above the jig, what happens a lot of times when you're setting the hook or you're reeling in fish, the bobber will slide down. Now see how it stopped there? But that rubber bobber stop can actually get pinned inside the grommet. Okay, and to prevent that, if you put a bead just above it, so in between the bottom of the bobber and that bobber stop, that should prevent it from actually getting jammed into that bobber. And what happens is when you cast it out and the weight of the bobber actually hits the water first before that jig can carry the line through the bobber, that bobber stop will get jammed in there, and the weight won't actually sink to the depth that you need. So I would recommend putting a bead on there. I'm going to be using that in the future. This is just something that I noticed the past couple weeks of fishing this. So now let's tie the jig on. If I'm fishing live minnows, I don't want any give to my hook, okay, which is why I tied on the improved clinch knot in the first video. And if you want the full in-depth of how to tie on an improved clinch knot, again, go to that video. If I'm using jigs, if I'm using plastics like tubes, maybe one of these swim baits, something like this, something like a little swim bait, then I tie on a loop knot because I want more action on that jig. See, when you tie on a minnow, or when you hook on a minnow, that minnow's alive. It already has action. I don't need to provide any extra action for it. So that's, but I want it to be as quick of a strike as possible. And with that improved clinch knot, it's almost immediate as far as if a fish hits that hook, I'm going to see it on the bobber. The bobber's going to move. The second knot that I use for these plastics, these tubes, is a basic loop knot, and it's very easy to tie. You're just going to put your monofilament line through your eyelet. You're going to pull out about, I like to pull out about 8 inches of line, 6 to 8 inches of line. So you got it doubled up like this, and you're going to double it over. You're going to pinch it together, just like that, and you're going to slide. You're going to pinch it with your left hand. You're going to slide and pinch it with your right. You're going to slide the right hand index finger and thumb down, and you're going to leave about 1.5 inches dangling. So there's going to be this loop here, all right? Because the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to flip it over the line, and it's very important to leave a loop to where you pinched your right hand, whoops, hold on a second, where you pinched your right hand pointer and index finger. So right here where my index finger is, I'm going to leave a loop there because I'm going to bring the jig back through that loop. And if you want, you can leave a little more line dangling from your right hand to your jig. Give a little more room for that loop. So you're just going to flip it around your main line. That might have been too many times here. I do it like 4, 5, 6 times. And so I flipped it around there. Now I'm going to take my hook and bring it back through this loop that I made. See this loop? I'm just going to put it right through that loop. I'm going to bring the entire jig all the way through that loop. Just like that. Okay? So here's my tag into my line and my main line. I put my loop all the way through and pull the jig all the way through. Now you're going to grab your tag into your line and your main line going back to your fishing rod. And you're going to make sure that loop is all the way through the jig, and you're going to grab your jig and you're going to slowly pull. Now don't pull it tight yet. Before you pull it tight, wet it down. It's going to make the knot slide a lot better. And slowly pull it tight. And don't yank on it either, okay? That's an easy way to burn a knot. So you're just going to slowly pull it tight. Now this is a loop knot because it has this loop here. See this loop? And this gives a bait a lot more action, especially on a windy day when I'm fishing these wobble bobbers. These bobbers are designed to actually move the bait a lot more in the water than something like this. And with this loop knot, if I'm fishing plastics of any kind, tubes or swim baits, it's going to give a lot more free movement to that bait to swing around and give it more action to trigger a strike from crappie or whatever you're fishing with. So that I wanted to clear that up of why I tied on an improved clinch knot in that video versus a loop knot. And in that video I was using minnows. I think I put a jig tube on the jig in the minnow just to demonstrate how you would rig it up, but I believe I used minnows in that video to catch those fish. So that is the loop knot. That is something that I would use a plastic like this, and all you're going to do, so if you're using a plastic like this or a tube, it's going to put it through the hook, and you're going to push the hook to where it starts to bend in the hook, and you're going to push it out through the spine. So it's got to sit straight in line with the hook here, and you're going to push it all the way up above this barb, just like that. Oops. I got to put it a little further into the hook. There we go. It might take a couple times. It's a little bit of a guess and check there. Okay. So now it should sit flat, in line with the jig, and when this thing has a loop knot, it's going to sit in the water and it's going to bounce up and down. It's got that tail has a lot of action to it. So now that I explained to you how to set up a couple different ways to put on the actual slip bobber, to tie on your own slip. Use the rubber bobber stops if you want. The different types of slip bobbers, the plastic grommets versus the metal grommets. And then obviously how to tie the loop knot. I wanted to talk about actual rod and reel. And the reel actually isn't that important as far as slip bobbers go. Something into 1,000 to 2,000 size reels for panfish is perfectly fine. Something that can hold anywhere between 4 and 8 pound test. That's perfect for panfish. But I got 2 rods here. Now the first one I actually tied up. I'm going to talk about that second. This is an 8-foot rod. Okay. Now this is an 8-foot ACC crappie sticks. This is a casting jig rod, and it's casting / jig rod. So it's kind of like a hybrid setup where you can vertically jig with this rod because it's got a sensitive enough tip. You can feel a soft crappie bite, but it's got a strong enough backbone and it's long enough to actually cast out if you're really trying to cast out away from the boat. If you have a longer rod and the further out away from the boat you are, if I'm trying to set the hook on a fish and a fish comes up and eats the bait like this, okay, but my bobber, I'm casting way out here and I try to set the hook with a short rod, it yanks it this way and almost yanks it out of the fish's mouth, okay? So it yanks it like this instead of up. If you have a longer rod, you have a better angle to set the hook and get that hook set up into the fish's mouth. And that's why if I'm casting a lot with the slip bobber, I like using the 8-foot crappie rod. I'll link this one below, and I'll link the other one I'm going to talk about below in just a second here. But this is a great one, especially if I just want to vertically jig. I can take the bobber off real quick, put it back on. If you're casting a long way from the boat, or you're just doing a lot of casting with the slip bobber, I highly recommend the 8-foot rod versus anything shorter. 7/6 is probably the shortest I'd go for using a slip bobber. Okay, so this next one, actually the one I tied up on here, hopefully I don't hit any trees with it. This is the 11-footer. I can't even get it all in frame, but this is the 11-foot crappie pole, ACC crappie sticks. And this one I really like to use if I'm fishing close to the boat, okay? Because a lot of times if I'm fishing in deeper water over brush piles, and let's say these brush piles are 15 to 20 feet down, I only have to set my slip bobber 9-10 feet down a lot of times because these crappie will suspend up, especially if they're feeding, they'll suspend halfway up the water column. And the great thing about this longer rod is you don't actually have to reel this little rubber bobber stop through the end of the eyelet, okay, when you set your hook. Because if you can set my bobber stop 10 feet down on an 11-foot rod, you're never actually reeling it through the eyelet. So there's 0 chance it's going to slide on you. And this happens for all bobber stops. The main reason these bobber stops slide is because they get caught, again, in the eyelet as you set the hook in the eyelet of that rod. And when that fish is pulling on it, it puts pressure between the eyelet and the line, and it gets stuck right in the middle of it, and it'll slide down the bobber, or slide down the line as you reel that fish in. If I'm not doing a lot of casting, if I'm pitching this towards brush piles, I'm staying close to the boat, but I can still fish deep water without having to worry about that rubber bobber stop or whatever stop you're using from sliding up and down the line. This 11-foot rod, this is the one I highly recommend. If you liked this how-to video, if you want to see more how-to videos like it, be sure to like the video. The more likes I see on a video like this, the more I'm encouraged to keep posting videos that are similar to slip bobbers, tying knots, just how to fishing in general. Also, all the equipment you saw here, it's going to be linked in the description below. Any video that I mentioned is also going to be in the description below. The original how to tie the slip bobber and this wobble bobber video, how to fish crappie in wind. I'll link a couple more kind of bait fishing with these slip bobber setups, so you can actually check them out, see how I fish them. If you have any recommendations or you want to see something that maybe you don't know about, you want to see a tutorial, something in depth, comment section below. Let me know what you want to see. I always love hearing from you. I always like getting ideas, so definitely post it in the comment section below what you want to see next as far as a tutorial or a how-to fishing video. That's going to wrap it up for me. Wow, that sun came came back out. That's a good thing. I'm going fishing. I was a little worried it was gonna rain. Be sure to subscribe if you're not a subscriber. The bottom right corner of the screen down here, there's a red subscribe button. Be sure to click that and be sure to click the bell. The bell notifies you every time I post a video. So you gotta click the bell in order to get notified that I posted a video. Also, at the end of the video, you'll see my face holding a crappie. You can click on that to subscribe as well. We'll see ya. I don't have anything to throw at the camera. Whatever, just end it. Cut to black.